The thumbnail you just clicked on may look like clickbait, but it's actually a legitimate part of this video in which we will be exploring what Luffy's awakening and possible Gear 5 will look like, and why the Gomu Gomu no Mi might already have woken up. Hi, my name is Manu. I'm not a rubber man, but according to my doctor, I have a serious caffeine addiction, and for the past 2 weeks, I've become obsessed with learning the secret behind devil fruits and finding out Luffy's awakened form, because how the hell did Law and Kid do it before him? In the last video, I made my case that there are actual devils in devil fruits whose soul merge with that of the user, not only granting them their powers, but even inheriting the will of past users of the fruit. I also explained all the fundamentals about how devil fruits in general, as well as each of their individual categories work. So I strongly recommend you check that one out right after this, as they go hand in hand. The first thing I want to discuss is whether Luffy actually needs an awakening in the first place. My short answer is yes. Duh, the more badass the better. But I'm aware that many people actually don't feel that way. And I guess you could fairly enough argue that Luffy didn't need to rely on his own awakening to take down the likes of 𝙬𝚘𝚙𝚒𝚑𝚝, 𝚬𝚙𝚑𝚡, or the guards in Impel Down. Luffy now not only has future sight haki, but advanced armament and even advanced Conqueror's haki on a top level as well. Instead of relying only on his fruit, he's combining it with his haki, as no other character in the story has done so far. And in the end, seeing him being creative with his fruit is much more important to me than unlocking new powers, I think. But I think if you argue like this, you probably have misunderstood what awakening truly is. Now, awakening a fruit doesn't mean flipping on a switch and automatically getting a bunch of new powers flowing in. Minor spoiler alert, as Law's and Kid's awakening shows us, it seems to be much more of a process that requires a lot of energy and then increasingly gives the user additional reach and effectiveness on their powers, allowing them to break the rules a little bit. But the main prerequisite for awakening is true mastery over one's devil fruit, something that only very few people are able to do. And I think suggesting that Luffy hasn't, or maybe never will, truly master the Gomu Gomu no Mi is something that I just can't ever see happening, like ever. Kaido might be the physically strongest enemy he will have to face in battle, but I think we all agree that for the coming arcs, things won't get easier, but harder for Luffy. Facing Akainu, Blackbeard, and ultimately taking down the world government itself, all of it will require Luffy to maximize his potential, and I hope you agree that awakening his devil fruit will be an essential part of that. So, how close is Luffy to reaching this level? Are we talking Wano, or Elbaf, or Left Tail? Well, I would say let's look at all the factors that should or could determine how much more Luffy needs. Now, the first factor in mastering anything is age, and it's not exactly in Luffy's favor. People tend to forget that our meat-eating hero is not even legally allowed to drink alcohol in Japan or the US. Well, Germany's different. There you can start drinking at 16. Where was I? Oh yeah, Luffy is extremely young, while 𝙬𝚘𝚎𝚒𝚑𝚝 and 𝚬𝚙𝚑𝚡 are 41 and 48 years old respectively, more than twice his own age. They had a lot of time to figure out their powers and use them on countless enemies and in many different situations. However, we also know that Luffy, just like Law and probably Kid, have had their devil fruits from when they were kids, basically doing nothing but honing their skills for years. And they are the leaders of the worst generation for a reason. All three of them, and Luffy especially, are fighting prodigies. The next factor is the structure of the story. If Luffy should awaken, it's gonna be soon. There is a lot of prophecy around opening Wano and the man that Roger was waiting for. And so the year of the prophet, if you want to call it that, is right now, 20 years later.
誰かが生まれる。そして
And even though you might say that's not a fair argument, that doesn't change the fact that it's true. Now, Haki and Devil Fruits are somewhat related and even comparable in the story. There are 3 types, each with its own subcategories and advanced versions. And one of the most important lessons for unlocking one's Haki, according to Rayleigh, is this. So what if the same thing is true for Awakening? Just like advanced Haki can only bloom in the heat of the hardest battles, awakening one's Devil Fruit might also be bound to fighting strong opponents on the Grand Line over and over, just what Luffy has been doing. His Haki and Devil Fruit powers are intricately interwoven with each other, and in terms of mastery of his Devil Fruit, well, this was actually really fascinating to think about. Luffy is a quite special case after all. He's a Paramecia user, yes, but unlike Doffy or Magellan who produce their substance, or Mr. One who transforms his entire body into one, Luffy is 100% organically made out of rubber. As we can see in this scene here, he is not doing anything to turn into it. In fact, it's the other way around. It took Luffy years of training with Ace and Sabo to get basic control over his new body before he could even think about using it for combat. He has to make an active effort to force his body into shape, which is basically the same as for Logia users, the only difference being that they embody some sort of energy. Thus the extra category of special Paramecia that borders very close to the Logia category. So the fact that Luffy can run around without randomly stretching all the time is already a big feat in itself. For example, when he picks up Usopp on Water 7, his arm stretches but his fingers stay normal. Otherwise, that might have ended pretty badly for Usopp there. In his base form, Luffy uses his muscle power to stretch. In Gear 2nd, he expands on this by using his rubber body to pump blood and thus increase his power and speed. And pumping your own blood faster seems like a pretty fantastic control over his fruit to me. Gear 3rd is the same, using the rubber properties of his bones to expand his entire body, stretching and then forcing it into a gigantic shape. And with Gear 4th, it really gets interesting. Because here he uses the internal expansion of his 3rd gear, but limits it with Haki, compressing his body, which allows him to use the properties of this hardened rubber. As a result, his movements are so fast that the air has no time to go anywhere, allowing him to fly, while he can even charge up his punches, releasing them with even more power and speed. Just imagine taking a really hard and thick spring and compressing it flat before unleashing it. That's Luffy's entire body in Gear 4th. So while he does use Haki as a crutch here, he is able to control his powers even more harshly and precisely with this technique. The point I'm trying to make here is that Luffy has already taken his rubber body to the extreme. Could you creatively come up with a completely different use of his power? Probably, but the way he masters his body and uses it freely is pretty masterful in my books at least. So based on this, I would argue that Luffy has actually already been ready for his awakening during the time skip, similar to Kid and Law. I think the only difference here is that Luffy was not really aware that Devil Fruit Awakening was even a thing until Doflamingo told him about it, but maybe even more importantly, he has been really focused on Haki. Stating the obvious, Rayleigh has no Devil Fruit. He was a pure Haki mentor for Luffy because without advanced Haki, you can't even touch the big guns in the New World.
Haki?
And so I'm pretty sure that Luffy's awakening will come to him pretty swiftly should he ever feel like his Haki had reached its limits. So let's say it happens in the fight against Kaido, who might have his own awakening, or even a bit later. But what will Luffy's awakening actually look like? For Logia users, we suspect that they can turn the matter around them into their respective elements. For Zone Fruits, it means a larger, monster-like version of themselves that has increased stats across the board.
Monster point!
But since Luffy doesn't do us the luxury of fitting smoothly into one of these two categories, there are a lot of possibilities. So in the end, I decided to look at this question in terms of 3 criteria: internal versus external, likely versus unlikely, and whether or not I like it or not. This is my video after all, but please let me know what you think. Let's start with internal. This would mean that instead of affecting his surroundings like Doflamingo, Luffy's fruit would actually enhance his ability inside his body. Law's Awakening, for example, is an enhancement of his current abilities as well. And you could also argue that unlike Doflamingo, who only produces his string, Luffy is actually made out of rubber. That's his power. So considering that his awakening would only affect himself is not really all that unlikely to imagine. And also, if Gear 5 really was connected to awakening, I think it would mostly make sense for an internal one. The first idea here is basically Luffy being able to go into overdrive. With his awakening, Luffy gains complete control over his body. He's now freely able to mix and switch between gears whenever he pleases. The result might look like a much slimmer version of Gear 4th, expanding his muscles, pumping blood while compressing everything much more drastically. This form would give him not only ridiculous speed and strength, but also the variety that Gear 4th lacked. Basically, this is all Gear 4 variations at once. I think it's pretty easy to see something like this happening, but I think it would be a bit of a waste for such an important update. So, rated 4 out of 10. The next internal awakening theory is vulcanization. And that doesn't only sound pretty cool, it is. Vulcanization means that through heat, rubber is made smaller, harder, and way more durable. When you think about it, this fits Luffy's fire theme very nicely. That could be a great catalyst for that, and in return might allow him to tolerate heat and fire way better. Similar to Overdrive, Luffy would get a boost to all his stats, but more importantly, it might allow him to form shapes with his body and harden them. So Luffy could actually form weapons and shapes with his body, similar to Mr. 1. I think this idea is a lot more niche than the last, but I like it a lot more, so I give it a solid 7 out of 10. Last, for the internal awakening options, I have a really cool one. You know how Luffy can make a body part giant in Gear 3rd? Well, what if his awakening enhances his abilities in a way that allow Luffy's entire body to stretch like this, giving him a true giant form? First of all, I love that idea just aesthetically, but there is more to it. You might remember from my emo video that there already is a connection between Luffy and giants. Ors was basically a giant with Luffy's personality trying to use his abilities. And then there is the really big straw hat on Marijoa. Assuming that it's Joy Boys, Luffy could literally wear that big straw hat if he had a giant form. Heck, who knows, maybe there's even something on Laugh Tale that requires a giant to work it. Remember, the world government and also Kaido are trying to create giants at any cost. The only thing that is preventing them from being successful right now is that they are not yet subscribed to my channel for next generation anime content. So, do I think this is likely? Probably not, but if it's true, oh boy, I would be on board for the ride. 9 out of 10. Okay, so now let's talk about external awakening options. External meaning pretty much exactly how Doflamingo described it. The power of the fruit starts affecting the world around the user. Doflamingo was able to turn things around him into string, and Kid is able to magnetize other objects. Not sure if magnetized is the scientifically correct term here though. The biggest argument for this over an internal awakening is Katakuri, I think. His abilities are the closest to Luffy in the entire story, and his awakening is clearly portrayed as turning the things around him into mochi, amongst other things. So, theory number 1, Luffy's awakening turns the world into a bouncy castle. Probability? Not 0. Popularity? Thanks, I hate it. 0 out of 10. Next. The way more tolerable version of this is that Luffy can turn things around him into rubber, but in a unique and more creative way. So instead of turning his hand into a sword, how about turning a house into another Luffy? Basically creating clones. Or imagine him springing arms and legs out of the ground and having his enemy barraged by an all-round Gatling gun. I do like this a lot more than Bouncy Castle, but the problem is that this would basically be a Naruto x Robin Lovechild shadow clone fist attack that doesn't really matter against a real opponent. So I rate this as very possible, but I'm not the biggest fan. So I don't know, 4 out of 10. So for the last one, I have a super crazy one for you. If your favorite wasn't in this, by the way, let me know what it is. The most out there, crazy external awakening theory for the Gomu Gomu no Mi I've come across is that Luffy, as a rubber man, is not only gonna be able to stretch his body, or even matter itself, the idea is that Luffy will be able to literally stretch time and space to distort the entire world around him. This would truly be a game changer and put him on an entirely new level. I think the possibility of this is like 1%, but I love it. 10 out of 10. And now make sure to watch the other Devil Fruit video here. What are you doing? Go watch it. What are you still doing here? Get the hell out of here.